What's up, Silver Stackers? Thank you for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer. Now let's talk silver. It is also possible that a commodity market could get so out of order with insufficient metal to deliver against demands for physical delivery, as demonstrated by the nickel commodity market over the past few weeks, that the entire commodity exchange for that commodity could freeze or even collapse. Freeze or even collapse. We know that the Comex is a lie. There is not that much silver. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. Every ounce of silver you hold in your bare hand, 100, maybe even more, other people theoretically own that same ounce digitally on the Comex. If you cannot hold it, you do not own it. This article is going to talk about, or this video at least is going to talk about, the possibility of the Comex collapsing within itself, which I do think is going to happen sooner than later. We already know that Comex vaults have been emptied, and no, that is not exaggeration, that is not speculation. I've covered articles mentioning that vaults are emptied. Coin and bars on allocation as ravenous demand for physical silver continues unabated. At the end of June, the amount of silver held in London vaults hit a 6-year low, reflecting almost insatiable demand for precious metals from investors and industry. It also stands in sharp contrast to the record reporting high of 1,180 million ounces, which occurred in June 2021. This represents a 15% drop, or which could also equate to 183 million ounces. This in turn reflects the ongoing strength of physical silver demand. That may sound counterintuitive given how silver price has performed recently, but in our view, this is a result of a mix of quite different drivers. I mean, if you really look at the possibility of silver or the Comex silver collapsing, the digital silver falling through and getting exposed, it's a lot higher than I think we've ever seen, given situations like the Hunt brothers, for example, where they owned 77% of the global silver supply and tried to turn all those contracts on the Comex into physical delivery. I mean, of course, but a natural collapse. So when I'm covering this article right here, he goes over the possibility of this happening, and he's comparing it to the U.S. Mint's options they have. They don't have much. He says they have 4 different options. It's pretty interesting. It's a great article exposing the U.S. Mint and the situation they're in with the shortage and all that, which, by the way, it's pretty complex, but I like the way he breaks it down. The U.S. Mint gets their silver. They outsource their silver now from the Sunshine Mint, other places, and by the way, they outsource it because they started getting, they started minting up to 40 million ounces annually. It made it difficult to maintain equipment and personnel for high production years, but also enabled the mint to trim costs in low mintage years. So that's why they started they started outsourcing their silver planchets. And it says right here, the solution to this was to outsource planchet production. And then the capital, personnel, and overhead costs, logistics, were someone else's problem. But the only problem with that is the U.S. Mint has laws that other mints don't have. They can only pay spot price. Only pay spot. Whatever the LBMA price is that, in that moment of time, where other mints don't have to. So which they get most of the silver from the Sunshine Mint, why would the Sunshine Mint want to sell to the U.S. Mint if they could only buy it for spot, or if the U.S. Mint can only pay spot, where they could sell their own production for much more than spot? So you can see why nobody wants to sell to the U.S. Mint, and they don't make their own silver planchets anymore. So they're pretty much, stuck in a corner. And since the U.S. government's, already trying to hold down interest rates on their own $30 trillion in debt, they're not going to look to fix this problem anytime soon. That's a whole separate video. I've covered this before, but this is just a little bit of the context of what Patrick Heller is talking about when he's given the U.S. Mint's options. So let's keep moving on into this. So he goes into the U.S. Mint runs the risk of only receiving the minimum amount of silver equal dollar planchets from these suppliers as specified in the purchase contracts. And then, like I just said, unfortunately, now the Mint does not have the equipment or personnel to again resume acquiring their own. So they have to keep outsourcing their silver planchets. They can't start making silver planchets themselves in large quantities, at least. So then he says, as he understands it, the mint has been able to negotiate some increase in silver eagle dollar planchet supplies on the basis of being a major longtime customer of these suppliers. However, suppliers have a huge profit incentive to provide the U.S. the minimum number of planchets. Like I said, why would anyone sell to the U.S. Mint if they can only pay spot? In addition to there being difficulties of the U.S. Mint obtaining sufficient silver eagle dollar planchets from their suppliers, there's also the difficulty of actually obtaining physical silver upon maturity of the commodity contracts. And that's where we get into the Comex and the possibility of it collapsing. Now, do you see why I had to give all that context to this situation? The New York Comex allows mature contracts called for delivery under the underlying physical commodity to be settled by one of four different options. 1. Delivery of the physical commodity. 2. Cash payment instead of the commodity. 3. Shares of an exchange-traded fund for the equivalent quantity of the commodity. Or 4. Exchange for physical. Exchange for physical means that the party requesting delivery of the commodity instead receives some cash plus a contract for the same number of ounces of the commodity in the London market. The last of these used to be considered an option only to be used in an emergency, since it was the most expensive way to sell the contract. However, it appears that most settlements in the silver market over the past several years have been exchanged for physical. In other words, those hoping to obtain physical silver at spot by purchasing a commodity contract and holding it to maturity either will never get the physical metal or only receive it much longer in the future than the maturity date of the original contract. It is also possible that a commodity market could get so out of order with insufficient metal to deliver against demands for physical delivery, as demonstrated by the nickel commodity market over the past few weeks, that the entire commodity exchange for that commodity could freeze or even collapse. With the information in last week's column provided here, which he goes over the laws and regulations, that's the one where like the U.S. Secretary shall not pay more than the LBMA spot. That's all that stuff, violation codes, sick, blah, 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 blah. But regardless, you could see why he's saying you now have a better understanding of the difficulty of the U.S. Mint to acquire sufficient silver to meet demand for its products, also why premiums are so high, also why the U.S. Mint is not going to just start lowering their premiums. And by the way, this is the article where he goes over all the codes that the U.S. Mint is in. 31 U.S. Code 51163A. This guy really breaks this stuff down, and it is also because he's been in business with them. He even, I forget where it's at, but he even mentions, working with one of the, where is it at? I think he mentions it in this article. Maybe it was the other one, but regardless, let me see. And this is the part, actually, this is the most important part right here, guys. This is what I was talking about. This is why the U.S. Mint situation with physical silver is not going to get it's not going to get any better. And this is what I was talking about with the spot price. U.S. Mint's prevented from complying with one statutory requirement to produce silver American Eagle sufficient to meet public demand by another statutory requirement that prohibits it from paying a price higher than the paper market spot price. Other mints are allowed to pay higher, and they are doing so, right? And then he says, until these statutes are changed to allow the U.S. Mint to purchase physical at spot prices, above spot prices at least, it will continue having difficulty in acquiring sufficient metal to meet public demand. And then he goes into what I was just saying. Other mints, or private and government minting operations, are able to acquire silver at prices above market spot prices, and they are doing so. Therefore, they are more likely to obtain the silver they need because they are paying higher prices than the limit imposed on what the U.S. Mint can pay. And then he goes in to say, the U.S. Mint's problem of obtaining sufficient silver could be cured by changing the law to give the mint greater price flexibility. But he says, I doubt that would ever be considered The federal government has a strong interest in holding down silver and gold prices as a major tactic to minimize the interest rate it pays on its own $30 trillion of debt, like I mentioned earlier. This concern would almost certainly override any consideration of allowing the U.S. Mint the flexibility to acquire sufficient silver. So as long as the market price for physical silver remains consistently higher than the paper commodity contract price, the U.S. Mint is going to continue experiencing difficulty in obtaining sufficient silver. Had to give some context there as well. You know, when I say something, I want you guys to understand I'm not just making this stuff up. You know, I do my research. I make sure what I'm talking about is accurate, or I wouldn't talk about it. But regardless, I really want to pass the question to you. What do you think the Comex is going to do? Or how long do you think this facade is going to last? I have talked to other people, even like Andy Scheckman. A lot of different people say that it's going to collapse sooner than later, with the amount of silver we need. And actually, I was covering another article where they were mentioning that it could happen extremely soon. They covered, since the silver squeeze, it's just, you know, the vaults are just being run dry. And it's not just going to be the U.S. Mint, you know, with these silver shortage problems. It's not just going to be the investment sector. It's going to be the industrial sector as well. That's the part that a lot of people don't incorporate. I don't think they're looking from, you know, just the Eagles and rounds and mints, the Perth mints sales, which are through the roof, the Royal Mint sales, which are through the roof. U.S. Mint sales are down dramatically, but regardless, people are looking at these numbers and not looking at, hey, you ever thought about how much silver we're going to need in the next 10 years from the EV sector or solar panels, and how there's not much recycling going on and all that? You have to incorporate that as well. If you're looking at silver's price, if you're looking at just the premiums of these coins, yes, the investment sector makes sense, especially with the U.S. Mint situation. I don't think their premiums are going down. It looks like they're only going to keep getting higher with the U.S. Mint at least. But regardless, you know, there's many different angles to play at this, and I wanted to bring to you the possibility of the Comex collapsing and what that would look like. So yeah, pass the question to you. If you thought this video was worthy of a like, please like the video. If you think that my channel's something you would like to subscribe to, please subscribe and click the bell. I do post daily videos, mostly 2 a day. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. This was Silver Slayer. The link to this article will be in the description. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.